Hi everyone, this is Jake, Casey's husband. Casey puts a lot of time into making this podcast, but she's happy to do so because we know how helpful it is to so many of you. The other thing we know is that our Paradigm Shift program is the fastest, most effective, and most sustainable way to make progress parenting a PDA child or teen. If that's of interest, click the link in the show notes to join the program priority list. Then we'll reach out by email and invite you the next time Casey hosts a free live call about the program, which she does only for parents on the list. Enjoy the show.
Hi, and welcome to the At Peace Parents podcast. I'm Casey, and I'm here to empower you in your decision-making as a parent of a demand-avoidant child. My goal is to share insights that will generate aha moments and support your connection with your child. I'm a mom of two amazing little boys, one of whom is PDA, and I've worked with hundreds of parents just like you to teach them how to lead their child out of burnout and find the clarity, peace, and sense of community they need. Welcome, everybody, to the At Peace Parents podcast. Today, I have a friend of mine, Kelly Edwards, who is the founder of the 90-Minute School Day, and she has a PDA child as well and is an expert in unschooling and the way that we sometimes need to move away from more traditional homeschooling approaches to support our PDA children. So today, we are going to talk about all the things. We're going to talk about screens, tech, and AI and its role in parenting and, in some cases, educating our PDA children and teens. So welcome, Kelly.
Thank you, Casey, for having me. I'm thrilled to be here. And I think it's funny. I don't know how you've been, but ever since we set this up, I'm like, oh my gosh, everything is about AI now. Like you and I were like trendsetters when we set up this call. And now it's like, I got an email this morning. I had a family member last night get like hoodwinked by AI. I mean, like, it's just like all over the place all the time. So that's how I feel. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I mean, I feel cautiously optimistic and terrified.
Well said.
But yeah, I mean, I think that's a bigger picture feeling than I just have in regards to parenting. But yeah, let's talk about it. So in general, Kelly, how do you feel about screens, tech, and AI in general with regards to parenting your PDA child and or when you help families with their children in this modern era that we were ushered into so quickly over the last 5 years?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Especially the last 5 years. That's a great question, Casey. I think I'd almost have to like give some background information about how I thought I would be parenting and who I thought I would be parenting and how I am currently parenting.
Yeah, love it.
And very quickly, like, because I feel like it's a thread that a lot of parents will resonate with, and perhaps it's, you too. Like, so for me, when I talk about parents, especially parents with PDA children or teens, like there's a through line that is like, hey, we were like low tech. We were like the wooden blocks, no plastic in our house kind of visioning parenting, right?
Yeah.
At least I was. And I was like, oh yes, only like Waldorf dolls, no Barbies, like all this stuff. And then life happens and you start to like realize like, okay, this is not practical. And, I live in the modern era and et cetera, et cetera. But like, as far as where screens came, like we were very like screen limits when we started parenting and had lots of good reasons for that. And then over the years, we have transitioned to where it's just not a discussion. So you could say that it's unlimited screens because we don't have limits. Like my kids don't think that we've just neutralized it from where we did have limits to now. That's not to say that we don't have like boundaries and agreements and rhythms around screens, but like that's kind of where we've traveled.
Yeah.
And what about you?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't envision a completely screen-free life with my kids, but I was certainly in a position of like thinking, I'm going to be the one in control completely, and I'm just going to decide like how much screens they watch and what they watch and and it'll be maybe like half an hour a day. And I held that until my older PDA son, Cooper, hit burnout. Mm-hmm. And it was about a year into burnout when I finally was like, okay, fine. Like, just watch for 12 hours a day if you need to. And I don't think that was an entirely mindful decision, but the cost of me maintaining screen time limits was like not just detrimental to Cooper, but also to my mental health and stability. And also at the time I had a 1-year-old. I like couldn't even get him out for fresh air or keep him safe or have him, fall asleep for his naps because Cooper would be like trying to break down the door and screaming, right? So it became a sort of like giving up. But then over the course of those 3 months, it was a summer where I just, I could observe what he was watching, but he would watch 8 to 12 hours a day and I could actually see him learning. He started getting out like crayons and colored pencils and like pausing. He would have his iPad and the big screen in the living room, and he would pause and like for the first time in 2 years, color and draw robots. I have a binder full of robots, but I hadn't seen him voluntarily hold a pencil, a crayon, or a marker in 2 years. So I was like, oh, there's something here. Like something is happening. Now, what's interesting is like, now I feel like it's much more of a tool that my son uses. Like, he actually doesn't watch that much. Like, he uses it to play like Minecraft stuff while he's like FaceTiming with his friends, or he might watch a movie, but he's not like he was sort of glued to the screen. My younger son, who we're exploring PDA with in the PDA lens, he has more of that like needing to be on a screen all the time, and it's hard for me to get him off. So yeah, it's interesting because it's like 5 years later and it's bringing up some of the anxieties I thought I had let go of.
Yeah. I'm like, don't you love it when it happens? You're like, wait, we've done this. Like, this has been put to bed. Yeah. What were you doing digging it back up?
Like, why am I worrying about this again? So yeah. So I would say like my screen relationship is complex, but it's also become much more neutral, and I'm more concerned with like how they're using it than if they're using it. And ultimately I'm like, the ship has sailed. Like, our kids are going to need to know how to use screens, right? Like, there's it's a tide, it's a tsunami. Like, none of us can hold it back. And so I actually feel like I'm doing a service of like, we're in it with them. We're making sure that they understand the content that they're stumbling across. And sometimes we have to prevent that. And like, it's like, we're not avoiding it. And I think there's a degree of acceptance that I finally have of like, yeah, do I wish my kids could have an analog childhood like I did? Yeah, I think that would be great for them, but it's not going to happen.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's some grief to that, right? Because like when I think back, and I loved how you phrased it, like the analog childhood, but when I think back on my childhood, like my parents were worried about TV time, right? So like I had a limited TV time growing up where I remember like it was like 30 minutes a day. And then in the summers I could have 2 hours. And every once in a while she would like we'd be on vacation. It would just seem like we could do whatever we wanted. And that was like really exciting. But that's like my point of reference, right? Because I didn't have all this and I was totally not into video games. My brother was. I had my nose in a book. Yeah.
Me too. Yeah.
I would just read books. I'm still like that. Yeah. And I want like the paper book, right? I want to touch it. I'm nothing against, like my husband got me a Kindle and I was like, this is years ago. And I was like, yeah, I can't do this. My brain doesn't work this way. I need to know where I am in the book so I can flip back to it. And I can't do that with this. I mean, maybe if I persevered, maybe I could have made the adjustment, but I'm just happy with paper books. Just little grandma over here.
Yeah, no, totally. And tech in general, I try and see as neutral, especially like with kids who are autistic or need assistive communication devices. And like I see tech facilitate my son's ability to do things as well, whether that's accessing a basic need or just like allowing for him to make friends with kids who are from his private school and live a half an hour away.
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah. I mean, there's so much learning, like the tech landscape. So me and you are here mourning our analog childhood. So, okay, we've done that. But like, it's really exciting when we think about what is available to our kids and what's like ahead of them with this like digital landscape that they're native to, right? They're growing up, and especially we were talking in my community about tech and learning recently, and one community member was just talking about how she chats with Gemini, which is Google's AI, kind of throughout her day. And I was like, oh my gosh, I had this epiphany. Her kids are 3 and 6, and like my youngest is 7, and just like I'm parenting different kids than she is. She's in this new generation. Whereas like I grew up talking to, well, I can't say her name because then she's going to be in on this conversation, but she's somebody that you ask questions to and you get involved with in your kitchen per se. And you're like, hey, can you give me a swap for baking soda or whatever? Yeah. And my kids watched me do that when they were her kids' ages, but that's not generative AI. That's like machine AI, right? And so it's kind of all been pre-programmed. So it's kind of interesting to kind of think about like, what and how and where does this go? And none of us, I don't think any of us really know, at least me and you, and probably whoever's listening or watching this is like, also like, yeah, where does this end up? And we just don't know because we're on the frontier of this like digital landscape. We're parenting like our parents did with TVs and the first initial gaming equipment, but like, this is a whole nother ball of wax.
Totally. So what is like, how have you watched your kids use AI, or parents that you work with in your community while they're unschooling, homeschooling?
Yeah, it's so fun to talk about this because like they're using it in so many different ways that I think as parents, we get kind of nose blind, especially if you're at home with your kids, whether your kids are in burnout or whether you are intentionally at home with your kids homeschooling, or whether your kids are in school and you're home with your kids. You as the parent are always doing something, right? And so we kind of have an understanding of what's going on, but maybe it's like when we start to intentionally observe that we start to notice things. So that's a challenge we did in our community recently where it's like, okay, all we're paying attention to is how our kids interact with tech. And then we're going to come back together and we're going to talk about it. And we were all kind of geeked out at the end because it's just bringing we know that they're doing games. We know what shows they're watching. We know what games they're playing, things like that. But we're not thinking about it too deeply. Does that make sense? And so when we were like bringing observation to the table and sharing with one another, that's where it got kind of interesting because we had put a little bit more thought behind it. So for an example, your robot example is a really good one of how your son was watching TV and something had inspired him and he was sketching out robots while he's watching TV. So this is a different component than how we typically think about screens. And so like one mom shared with me recently how her daughter, 7 or 8-year-old daughter, was using a digital Alexa, and they were watching the screen and have kind of started using the visual component to that device, as well as then that transitioned to her going to YouTube because she wanted to make some clay. Their clay had dried out. And so this is an example of a self-directed child and creating her own project, right? And this would be project-based learning. So she's taken initiative. She knows how to resource herself, right? When I was growing up, if I had wanted to make clay, I would have had to ask my mom. My mom and I would have to figure out how to do this. We wouldn't have had the internet. We would have maybe gone to the library or she'd call a friend, right? So it speeds things up. So she's able to go to YouTube. So she gets a sibling in here and then they're able to partner together, access the supplies and make clay. So they use several different types of artificial intelligence. They used YouTube. They used the supplies. She also networked with a human being in her home to create what she wanted to do. So that's like a really simplistic example. But another teen was sharing with his mom how ChatGPT has like the Monday voice. And so she didn't know that. That's like the sarcastic voice that ChatGPT has. And so we were all like, oh, look how cool we are. It's kind of like when we learn teen slang. And, but like another teen uses like AI to help him code, right? So he's really into coding. And so when he needs little assistance, it's almost like a tutor. And I asked him, I was like, okay, well, if you didn't have that available to you, what would you use? Like, let's just say like AI got like erased. And he was like, oh, I'd go to YouTube. And I was like, well, okay, YouTube's gone too. Well, now what are you doing? And he's like, well, I would go to the Google. Like,
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh, okay. Like I'm still of the generation where my knee-jerk reaction is still that's where I go. I go to the Google.
Yeah.
And then like if I'm being really sophisticated, I might try out YouTube. And then, I do use AI as well, but it's just like my brain has built differently than his. Like that's kind of last resort.
Yeah.
If we take away the Google from him, then he's going to have to go to the library or find a friend. But I think that's kind of a good example of how the differences and how we grew up analog and how we're converting as adults and how our kids are just like, it's intuitive because they've grown up witnessing the adults, children, and teens around them use technology in different ways. Did that answer your question?
Yeah. Yeah. So I invested in like a year of Chat GPT, right? Like the little upgrade.
You have the paid version.
I don't even know what it is, but like I paid for it. So there it is. And I have a certain amount of images I can generate. And so I don't really use that one, but I had the idea like one time when Cooper was, seeking that undivided attention because he was feeling dysregulated. He was in the I'm bored loop. And I was like, oh, like, do you want to check out this new AI? Like, we can come up with ideas to generate images. And he was like, what do you mean? And I was like, yeah, just type in whatever you want to create an image of. And so he did his special interests, which is like puppies, football, fishing, right? He was stunned like at how beautiful the images were. And it was like, he had this sort of like aha moment of like, oh, I can use this for things that I want to do. So one example is he's co-creating a book in like a Google Drive with his best friend who lives a half an hour away. So they like sometimes in person will type it, like they'll take turns typing, or they'll FaceTime and work on it. And then they'll generate images from AI for like the cover of the book and different fonts. And then he'll also like, he spent like a couple weeks in the evenings. He would be like, okay, mom, say a place, say two colors, and say a animal. And then like he would rotate to my husband and we'd each get to say it. And then he'd generate like a new logo for a football team, like making them up. Like, okay, there's a koala from Orlando who's purple and black. And then he created this whole like chart of how they play against one another.
Like kind of a playoffs?
Yeah, like a playoffs. And he entertained himself like this for like weeks, but it also, he would bring his little brother into it and he would bring us into it. And then he would create this tournament and then we would get to vote on who won or who didn't win. And he would transfer into Canva, actually do some editing on it and then transfer it back to this other image. So yeah, it's like what you said, that digital fluency of like, yeah, I'm just going to do this. Like, this is my idea and I'm going to execute it right now.
Yeah. And that's how kids are, right? They live in the moment. And I love that like this project that he created for himself is like, there's so much learning just in this one project. And he's self-directed, he's self-motivated. You strewed it, right? In a moment of boredom, you were like, hey, let me show you how this works. And then all of a sudden he was just like, oh my gosh, let me get my fingers on this. And I love that he was like creating characters. He was resourcing you all. So that's deep connection with family members, kind of like brainstorming together, filing that in. That's language arts right there, creating these characters. They're on a team. Then he kind of organizes it. Then he decides he's going to develop like a tournament. Again, like all of that is language arts, but it's also using what he knows about sports. And there's so much math and science in sports, right? So that's pulling that in. And then it's cultural also. So that's kind of social studies. So he's got all this going on. Then they're playing with each other and then he's showing it and he's using these different tech applications. So what started with ChatGPT has now moved into Canva. And then there's all of these science, technology, engineering, and math skills with the technology, right?
Yeah.
And then at the end of this, he has built up his self-esteem. He's excited. He has something that I'm sure he's showing not only family members, but he's sending, I think, did you say he's like sending to friends and everything? And then he's inspiring them and like, boom. It's so beautiful, right? And you can do it so much faster than he could have done the same thing in our analog childhood, but he might have gotten a little frustrated, especially when we think about our PDA kids or neurodivergent kids in general, any child that has having any kind of developmental difference or learning difference or whatever. their frustration tolerance can really impede them when we think about like fine motor skills or just frustration tolerance, the demands of having to involve people or lose some autonomy if someone else tries to hedge into their gift. So this technology is allowing him full autonomy, and yet he still chose to bring in others, but it was on his terms because this is his project and it was respected, which is like huge accommodations that we can offer our kids. Yeah.
Absolutely. And I didn't have to like draw all the pictures myself at a rapid.
You weren't there cutting them out, right?
Yeah.
Having to deal with how to cut them out correctly.
Exactly. I think the other side of the coin. So it's like one side of the coin is like this amazing possibility of built-in accommodations where like they get to tell the AI from a position of being in the decider, do this. And then AI generates it. Whether like another example is my son will be like, okay, workout for a 10-year-old boy for shins or like, you know, like calves. Yeah. And then it like generates the workout and he goes and does that. Right. But the other thing that I have noticed, which is the inverse of this, which is like they have this conceptualization of time and what you can accomplish in time that's inaccurate. Right. So it's like the YouTube stuff where they see just the highlights of
or it's sped up, you know?
Yeah. And it's like this process that requires planning. It requires like forethought. We need to actually purchase things in order to execute this. Like then it's going to take some trial and error. Like all of that is edited out of what they're consuming. So it's like often they will say things to me like, I want to do this. And it's like, well, I know there was a 3-minute video that showed that, but that probably actually took like 3 days.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, my PDAer right now is really into watching like acrylic videos where they kind of like squirt rainbow colors. And she watches it on YouTube, and then they use fan brushes and they make like a sunset and then they draw over it. And it's not sped up per se, but it's totally edited. But it's almost like, oh, here I am, do 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 do, and oh, look, just like that, I have this beautiful drawing. I just kind of like, and so if she sat down to do that, she would have to have a plan, and maybe she's thinking this is all intuitive, right? And maybe it is, but like, yeah, totally what you're saying about the presentation and the understanding versus reality is something that like is an invitation for us as parents to kind of come alongside and be like, okay, so in real life, this is how it works. And it's not as glamorous. Which is more information. Like they're curious, but you know, sometimes we have those big meltdowns because they had one idea and then we've got to ride that wave until that's over and we've kind of digested it. Maybe it's days or weeks later that we can circle back to the conversation. It's safe enough without bringing up any additional emotions.
Yeah. I mean, even like, you know, experiments where you have to like freeze something. It's like, bud, that's going to take a few hours. Like we can't jump to step 2. Like the YouTube video just cuts to the frozen, right?
Yes. They should do us a favor 24 hours later.
Yeah.
Like throw that in there, please.
Totally. So this kind of leads us into one of my questions, which is like, are there things about screens, tech, and AI that scare you for your PDA child, and what are those and why? Yeah,
there's a lot, I think, that scares me personally. The first thing that kind of like came to mind, I guess, when we first start talking about it is, for me at least, is privacy. Like once I give AI something, you know, because I use it myself, am I okay with AI having this? And then you can go down the wormhole of like, well, they probably already have it. That's true. But now I'm like intentionally, with my consent, putting it into its database, right? And so, you know, I think about that. Some other things that kind of like concern me are like, we had a conversation within my community about like how kids are getting extorted with AI images that, you know, it's their picture, but they've been altered and then they're kind of extorted about it. When you think about like, you know, I was a teenager when, you know, I remember my mom being like, never meet a friend online. I would love to meet you in person someday, Casey. I've met lots of friends online in real life. But do you remember that? Like,
oh, totally. The AOL chat room.
Yes.
I mean,
my mom, I was in the kitchen chatting because she was like, what are you doing?
No, I mean, there were lots of experiences in that little chat. And it's like, you don't know
Yeah.
what's happening.
You don't know what's happening. And you don't have enough life experience, and we still don't have a fully developed frontal lobe as a teen or a younger child, right? And so like as parents, we're kind of that extra scaffolding of helping them think through the process. So like those concern me. Kind of like when I think about like just how much energy they take, when I think about the environmental impacts,
Yeah.
I think about the impacts on communities where they're putting these data centers and how is that impacting the local people that are living there. When I think about like our legal system, and it's just not there yet. And so this is kind of like way out in front. And like, so what do I not know that I don't know about AI? So I kind of have like these different thoughts. These kind of came up in our community as well. And we were all kind of like exploring this. We're hoping to have another conversation fully to explore this in the future, because it just was too much for us that day, because we were sort of celebrating AI the day that we were talking about it. But like you have to think about both, right? And then like another thing is just like, what's the cost to convenience, right? And so when we think about, I have all these machines in my house, right? Like my great grandmother didn't have a washing machine. She didn't have a dishwasher. My life is so much better. And that, because I can throw dishes in the dishwasher. But I'm still filling that time where if I didn't have those things, I would be hand washing my dishes or putting my clothes out on the line. But now I'm doing something else. So yes, it saves us time and it's convenient, but also, what am I replacing it with? Right. Yeah. And lately, I don't know if you saw this stuff with, again, a mom shared this in our community about Mark Zuckerberg. Have you seen this yet? It just came out this week, how he was interviewed and he's like, hey, we're going to help the loneliness epidemic by giving you AI friends. Essentially, that's like it in a nutshell. And so my knee-jerk reaction to that is like, no. We are not going to be friends with robots. Like, no, that's like my knee-jerk reaction. I haven't spent a lot of time thinking about it. Well, I've been noodling on it kind of in like the wispy moments that you have during the day. And I'm just like, what do I think about that? Like, how do I feel about, because, I've read stuff about, soon we'll be able to use AI for therapy. And I'm like, what are we missing with replacing a human being with a machine? Now, like to argue that point, like, the robot therapist will have access to everything that the world knows about, psychological therapy, right? And so that's a great database that a human being is just not going to have in their head all the time. But a human being has a relational component where if I'm sitting in a room or even on a Zoom screen with you right now, like I'm able to see your facial cues, you're signaling safety to me, I'm signaling safety back to you. I know they can engineer that, but there's something about just being embodied with someone else. And like, I have friends online, I have a community online, but I know that I can meet them one day and I still have friends. So we have to balance it, I guess, is kind of like where I'm coming around to, is just how do we balance? How do we make sure that we're getting ourselves, and, especially for PDA, because let's tie it back into PDA, is like, as a pathologically demand avoidant or pervasive drive for autonomy person, my daughter needs a safe nervous system, and a screen certainly serves, and a robot serves in that capacity. But there's something human about having a sentient being, whether it's a dog or a human, to have contact with. Like, we can have both, but I don't know that we should replace one with the other, is kind of where I'm currently landed.
Yeah.
What do you think?
That was a lot. That's a lot. Okay, so privacy, environmental, sentience versus robot relationship, cost to convenience. Yeah, I think these are all great. So what came up for me about like what scares me in particular in relation to parenting, and like, our kids are going to be the first generation natives with this. One of the things that scares me in general about like AI, tech, and social media is like the algorithms prioritize like homogenization, right? So it's like all the AI images kind of look relatively similar. Like when I've played around with it and been like, give me a picture of an older woman with, she's plump and she's an older woman and she's like on a lotus flower, just like imagining my higher self. And it's like always a skinny woman who's like 60 but has no fat and no wrinkles. And I'm just like, no, like an actual 60-year-old higher self. But like you can see that even on social media and the influencers and like even when I make reels, I sometimes put on a subtle filter because I feel insecure about myself. And so it's like this move towards homogenization. And I think a big part of what both of us hope to do, Kelly, with our work with parents, with our own children, is just really affirming and accepting diversity within the human expression, right? And in a lot of ways, it feels like even the way that AI compiles and presents information, it's a very sanitized version of what's underneath what it's pulling from. So like, even when you Google now, it's like, I didn't even realize for a while that what I was reading was the
AI,
the generative AI pulling from the articles beneath. And when you read the articles beneath, there's more, it's juicier. It's like you can see different ways that people express themselves, different viewpoints, and like it takes it and just presents one. And that's what we're seeing now. So I worry about that for our kids. I also worry about like the job thing, right? Like, I mean, I'm not repeating what you said because I agree with you, like the environmental concern, the cost to convenience, all of that. But like even in my own work, both of us run live programs and have live communities. And I think for me, I love that because of that sentience piece, right? But to a degree, like some of what the value we provide is information, right?
Right.
And structure and methodologies and stuff like that. And I feel like in a certain way, it's becoming harder and harder to have ownership over that.
Yes.
Because it's like, well, someone could just AI what you're talking about and get your whole program. You know what I mean? Like, and so it becomes this like pressure to allow your humanness to lead. But it's like in this generic landscape, it feels very vulnerable to be like, this is me with my wrinkles. I'm 43. I look like crap today. Like, I have weird paradoxical things about me because I'm a human being and I'm not sanitized, right?
Yeah. Yes. Okay. So you've brought up a lot. I love this because
we're going deep, girl.
We're going deep. You are going so deep. And I'm like, yes, I've had all these thoughts too. So especially when you talk about, so let's go to jobs because you were just talking about that because this is something that I've been thinking about too, is like, my kids love that they can design images. Right. And it's great because it again is like, let's peg creativity and critical thinking for our kids. Right.
Yeah.
And it's great because you just gave a great example of how your son was creative with it. And my daughter has made her own cryptid that's like this storyline she's had for over a year. And so she was really excited to bring it to life. But I don't want her depending on some AI artist when she's a fantastic artist in and of herself. But then what does that say about like my husband has a friend who wrote a poem for his wife. And so it's his poem, put into ChatGPT for their anniversary and had it produced as like a song. And my husband played it to me in the car. My kids were jamming out to it. It's this country song. And I was like,
yes,
it
my
sounds
son's done that too.
Fully produced. And I'm just like, oh my word. Like my husband podcasts also, and like his podcast platform can like generate his voice if he like, that's an option. And I'm like, no, you can't reproduce this or that or you, like, no, that's like, it feels like inherently wrong to me. These are all my knee-jerk reactions. So when we talk about jobs, I'm like, okay, yes, I give like my business is built on giving parents information on moving out of like a school mindset and into self-directed learning, right? And you're doing the same thing. You're helping parents shift from behavioral parenting to nervous system based parenting. sorry if I put that in too much of a
No.
nutshell for you, but like we're helping parents like shift their mindsets around something that has just happened in their lives. And now they're having to work through how do I support my child? Because the way that all the experts are telling me is not working. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, yeah, you can get a lot of data and information on that. However, like I know from your program and my program, like the Q&A, the human component, the community of other parents helping each other, just hearing someone else's story all of a sudden helps bring yours into perspective differently because you're with other human beings. And even though you're not in person, which would be awesome, it's also really cool that we can be with people all over the globe that we wouldn't have ever been able to be with in person. So it's like this both and.
Yeah.
But like, let's just say I write a book and you write a book and it gives away all of our trade secrets, like all of the data, all of the information. You can buy the 90-minute school day and your nearest bookseller, and you can buy At Peace Parents in a book. You still need the person for true transformation, because information is like one step in the change process, but then you've got to start practicing and working with it. And when you start practicing and working with information, questions come up, and then
and dysregulation.
Yes. And
the need for another safe nervous system.
Yes. And so I don't know that we can get all of that from a robot, no matter how sophisticated they get, because if I like to think about it kind of because I'm a brain nerd, like I think about it left brain, right? Like AI would kind of represent the left brain. Like it's logical, right? It's kind of will-based, kind of like it's all very like to connect the dots and do the next thing. And you can override your nervous system. Yeah. Trust me, I've done it. It's gone through burnout. It's not pleasant. Don't do it. Listen to your body. But like your right side of your brain is more relational based, right? That's where we're building we have relational bonding and emotional connection. That's where we're communicating below our level of consciousness, like mammal to mammal, right? Is all happening right side of our brain. And that's what happens when we interact with other mammals, right? So even interacting with my dog, like she can like sometimes read my mind. I swear she does, because she's responding to my nervous system. If I'm worked up, she comes and she lays on top of me. She's not a service dog. She's just like a yokel local from like down at the humane shelter that understands like my person is struggling. I'm just going to lay on her. It helps her feel better, right?
Yeah. Well, also the role of intuition, which is like so often I approach things from a very logical and rational and linear way, and then I just freaking override myself with my intuition. I'm like, I'm not going to do that. Yeah. And it's like, I can't really prove that there's an intuitive hunch or where it comes from, but it's like, for example, like it didn't make sense to start doing what I did with my son. It went against all the rational information that was out there. It was like, this is wrong, right? This is not evidence-based. You're going to, if you don't...
You're going to ruin your son's life and your family, right?
Yeah, but ultimately, even if I didn't know how, it was like something inside of my body was like, you have to do this, right? And the same thing with like starting my business. I remember what made rational sense was to do contract work with some of my former colleagues in DC and get a paycheck for that. And instead of starting, to coach for free and not even knowing how many people had PDA kids. Like I remember when my mother-in-law was like, I mean, how many of you out there can there be? And I was like, we're going to find out.
There's
right? Apparently there's a lot. But at the time it was like, my intuition was like, well, let's see, let's move towards this. It feels good. It feels like the right next step, but it didn't make rational sense. Right. And if I had consulted generative AI, it'd be like, that's not a good business decision or a good financial decision.
Yes. Yeah. Let's talk about that, because that came up in my conversation with my community when we were having this conversation about, because you just said it, like intuition. Your heart was saying, this is your next step. And because of all of this tech we have, your business has been wildly successful and you've helped so many families because we have the internet, right? And we have all this social media and we have all these things. So parents who are like on the search, like there's got to be an answer this, I'm not taking the status quo of what my pediatrician told me or my psychologist or whoever they're working with, right? There has to be something that's going on. And then they find you and then they're like, okay. You know, all of that is from tech and learning
and algorithms
algorithms. We're grateful. However, like, if you had gone to ChatGPT and asked what to do next, ChatGPT would have been like, this is not a good idea because it's going off of all of the logic and the learning that's very left brain, this is my metaphor, versus right brain with your intuition. And that's where I think with our kids, we've got to be like, in ourselves, we've got to be really clear, like it is a tool. Yeah. I am a human being. I'm using this as a tool. I am not asking this
like right from wrong.
Right from wrong. I'm not asking it how to live my life. It is not in charge of me. I'm in charge of me. And I can use this for information to help inform me in my decision-making process. But I'm going to just not going to give it authority over my life, which I actually think it's interesting because PDA has such a drive for autonomy and not being told what to do. I think it's going to be interesting to see, like right now, my PDAer is too young. She's not like able to probably like think about it this way. But one day when she's a teen, she's probably just naturally going to be like, oh, why would I ask ChatGPT? No.
Yeah.
Nobody the boss of me.
Totally. Yeah. Well, in that vein, what types of boundaries, guidelines, or values have you sort of used or instilled in your children and in your home as you are starting to use AI? Or have you?
Yeah, I think so. We don't have anything like firm about it, except that it is a tool. It is a machine. We are using it, just kind of like how I was talking. We're using it to help us in something that we want to achieve. Kind of like we talked about earlier, like it's a kind of a natural progression of speeding up a Google search but you've got to fact check it too. Like the information it gives you, you still need to do your work to go back and make sure that wherever it sourced it from. So sometimes it just gives you information without sourcing. So we talk about like, you always need to get its sources and then you need to read the sources. And then I encourage my kids to always ask themselves like, okay, so this is what one person wrote, but what's an alternate point of view I can research to bring into this so I can be considering multiple points of view? Because kind of like what you were saying earlier, we don't want to be homogenous. I want my children to be creative, be problem solvers, and be able to critically think. And there's always lots of views on this. Like, you know, the American Pediatric Board recommends like no more than 2 hours of screen time a day. Okay, well, that's a random blanket statement to put on a whole bunch of diverse human beings. And like, I personally disagree. And my family does things differently. And so we're okay with that. We're not going to let you tell us what to do. Sorry, I'm kind of all over the place. So the first thing, like for us, what I've done for myself is I need to get to the bottom of my feelings with this thing. So like I just told you, like this thing with Zuckerberg this week, I'm like, I'm not there yet. I'm still dealing with my feelings.
Yeah.
I need to get to the bottom of like what I think about something first with how AI is like rolling it out. And then what I do is everything goes against our family values, which we have written out and we have like decided as a family, my husband and I, and we talk to our kids like they agree with our family values. Like they're pretty basic, like moral values here. We hold what our decision making against our family values and against why we're homeschooling. And we hold that against it and we ask, okay, does this align? And if it doesn't, then does something need to change with our values? Or is this just not something that we want to do? Right. And so that's just something that when we're looking at AI, I would just be like, we're not going to give AI decision-making powers over us. We're not going to solicit it like it knows better.
Yeah.
We have like elders in our family. We have elders in our community that we need to go to, and we're losing that, right? That's kind of one of the things that I think is kind of in flux with so much digitalization is things are, or maybe not losing it, but it's shifting and it's harder to have community, which is becoming more and more important for the loneliness epidemic, more human connection, whatever that looks like. And then like, I think like understanding that we have the right to change our mind. I'm always telling my kids, like, hey, you can disagree with me. If you think, if like we've said no to something and you want to push back, you just need to be respectful about it. That totally doesn't always happen.
Yeah.
That's the goal. One day maybe. But that's a family value. Like, we just want to treat each other with respect. So I do my best to treat them with respect. And like, I have my moments. I'm a human being. And so when I'm not respectful, they'll call me on it, and I call myself on it, and I come and apologize and repair. And that's just part of it. So just having that kind of like, this is in flux, this is kind of where we are now, and we might shift. But I have a bunch of questions that I gave to my community to help us think through these. So just in broad categories, I'll list them here. Is that okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
So first and foremost, like, how do I feel about AI? What do I notice in my body when I hear the term AI? Do I associate that with support or threat? Like, kind of dig into that. Am I avoiding AI? Am I curious about it, excited about it, overwhelmed, all of the above? So like, flesh out your feelings first. Then the number two, like, family values and alignment. What matters most to you in parenting and for like my community in homeschooling? Can AI support any of those values, right? And you and I have discussed a whole bunch of them, and there's more and more. Does it threaten any, right? And so am I afraid my child will do less or learn less if they use AI? And where does that fear come from? Because we always want to get to the bottom of our limiting beliefs. Like, if I have that belief, is it true?
Yeah. Yeah.
A lot of times we all of a sudden we're like, oh, it's not actually true. It's some work I need to do, and I'm gonna do that next Saturday. Let me pencil it in, right? And then just like talking about the ethics and discernment. What kind of boundaries or invitations feel nourishing, not reactive to our family? What kind of relationship do I want my child to have with tech? And how can I model through thoughtful use myself? And, like, we're just constantly talking about, and it's conversational around. And then the last part is just to kind of like examine, am I doing this because I feel external pressure, right? From someone else? Maybe they're really excited about AI, but I'm not there yet. Am I feeling like I need to try it just because, because we're mammals and we're kind of like in community together. So do you feel pressure to keep up with another family, or what's trending? Are you using it to reduce time and energy, or to prove that you're doing enough? And how might AI be helpful to help you do less, not more? And so like, just kind of like, again, holding it, like, I use it for all sorts of stuff. And I think it's a very valuable tool, but
yeah,
it's a
tool.
It's a tool.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the crux of like everything that we're talking about. It's like, it's so easy to tip into the space where you're sort of at the whims of tech, not as a sentient being, but just like, you don't feel like you have control in relation to it. And I'll give you an example from my own life. Like, I've been on social media now for 4 years consistently. Before that, I did not, no, maybe 5 at this point. I didn't even log into my Instagram. I didn't go into my Facebook. Like, I really didn't do a lot of social media. And when I first started, it was a lot of fun, a lot of connection. And then it's evolved into like a part of my business, right? And so I go through periods that often correspond to when I'm stressed, right? Where some of my own tendencies for trying to exert control can play out in the social media, because it gives you like a sense of control of like checking something, or, like getting into the algorithm scroll where you're like, you're sort of like falling into this rhythm that you're not choosing, where it's like, oh, I just literally spent 2 hours scrolling and feeling bad about myself. And like, it entertained me in the moment. And then I feel horrible afterwards. Like, or, compulsively checking social media as if that is a semblance of control. It feels like it, but it's not actually. It's how people like compulsively check the news, right?
Yeah. Or you get hooked into a certain like cycle with the news, and you can just spiral down from there. And all of a sudden you're like, we're going up in flames. Everything is a dumpster fire. I mean, like, you can't sleep, and you're having weird dreams, and you wake up exhausted. It's awful.
Totally. And so it
never happens to me, obviously.
Oh, Tech, yeah, it's like, and so when I see, and I sometimes will see, we don't have like rules around screens or tech or AI, really. Like my son only uses AI when he asks me and I'm there, right? Because it's very much my account. And like, he'll be like, Mom, can I do this? And then I'm there with him in the room. We do allow YouTube, but the YouTube algorithm can very quickly get into violence, pornography, and swearing, like really fast. Like,
well, and just mistyping something or mishearing a pronunciation. Yeah, YouTube has to be on when we're in.
Exactly. We need to be in earshot and eye shot, if you can say that, because it's like, even if, like, let me give you an example. My son likes the ASMR videos and like candy making videos, which are great. But he like stumbled upon this, the algorithm brought to him this thing where this woman would do cotton candy and she'd like crush up Jolly Ranchers or like all different kinds of candy and stuff. And then she'd make the cotton candy with her own machine. But then it was like this really long, like phallic cardboard thing that then she would like put her mouth over and like suck the freaking cotton candy off. And I'm watching my freaking 5-year-old being like, oh, this is normal. Like, this is like, you know, cotton candy. And I was just like, you guys need to stop watching that because one video away from pornography. But like in their little minds, they're just watching.
She's like having like this a religious experience with this Jolly Rancher candy cane, candy, whatever it is. I want that too.
And like I would like couldn't stop watching it, and like it was just terrible. My husband and I were like looking at each other, like, what is this? But I can see when my son gets into the like same sort of scroll or like dopamine seeking or control seeking that I do on social media.
Yes.
And I will be like, hey, bud, it looks like it's time for a break from YouTube. Like, why don't we watch a movie together? Or like, it's time, even just like it's time for kids YouTube, so that it's not this endless dopamine seeking that can go into these really scary places very fast.
And there's your intuition too, right? Like, just like only like I can't tell anybody else how to do their kid. It's your kid. This is your child. You know this child, and this child knows this child, and your family unit dynamic understands each other so much more than anybody else. And you've got to trust your intuition. If something is telling you to pull back,
like that ASMR video with candy, I was like,
we've had similar things where like, you know, one of my daughters was really into mermaids with a friend, and they were like YouTubing mermaid videos. Well, that got strange really fast. And so it's a very similar experience where like grown women and grown men are dressed as mermaids. And it was just like, I was like, there wasn't anything necessarily inappropriate in that video, but then I was like
the next one, it's going to be inappropriate.
Right. And you know, like we all want to do our due diligence to protect our kids, but at the same time, like it's not if, it's just when, right? Like the average age that they encounter pornography now is 9. And so like, it's about having those conversations. We're totally deviating from, but I guess it kind of all.
No, this is all like what's on parents' hearts and minds of like screen tech and AI. Like it feels terrifying in some ways because, you know, I think many of our families and our communities are open to more flexible ideas about screens. And we have kids with sensitive nervous systems, dopamine bound brains, and we're in burnout ourselves. And so like the pressure to constantly be supervising because this could so easily happen, which to circle back, Kelly, could not have happened when we were kids. Like our moms could actually like put us on a show and be like, here's like, you know, the Disney Channel or whatever, the Mickey Mouse Club, I'll be doing dishes for an hour, right? Like even when parents do screen time limits, and I know this from my work with families of neurodivergent kids, like they're freaking good at this. They figure it out. Like they find a way to go over and around sort of what we're trying to do to protect them.
Yeah, they're brilliant, and they're good at tech. Yeah. And that's where it comes back to like felt safety in a relationship, right? Like that's the bedrock of everything.
Yes.
Like felt safety in a relationship, how do we like partner with our kids, help them understand what is safe, what is okay and isn't okay, and have agreements, when we're all regulated in that perfect space. It doesn't happen very often, but like every once in a while we can have these really great conversations, and they want the same things as we do, right? And they need our experience and scaffolding to help guide them, but it's consent based. And so it's about like, if we try to get into the control dynamic.
Yeah, like us controlling them. Yeah.
And we know that is just like not helpful for anyone, but especially for neurodivergent kids, especially for PDAers. Like,
yeah, like it's not happening.
We learned that lesson really quickly. Like, okay. So it's more about like coming alongside, having those side-by-side conversations, talking through it. And then when it happens, we talk through it, right? And there's never any shame. And, turn, run, and tell is what I tell my kids all the time. Like when things get uncomfortable for you, turn, run, and tell. And like, there's a lot of like positive things to screen time. Cause like one of my kids, she got really injured yesterday rollerblading. And she's okay, but like it scared her. She went into fight or flight because of the injury. She's way down the street. I'm working. My husband's in the house. He has no idea that she's injured. And so her instinct is come home now. So she's skating home. Well, an adult neighbor saw her, wanted to help, grabbed her. This is not, he's helpful, but like that was not appropriate at all and set off her threat response even more. Anyways, but it was a great way. It was an invitation for us to have a conversation about like, what is it? Bodily autonomy, because it's constant. Like we're constantly having these conversations. You can't just have a one and done conversation on bodily autonomy. It's like every opportunity. So this was a safe opportunity to talk about like, it is never okay for someone to touch your body without your permission. I'm so sorry that happened to you. We'll be having a conversation with the other adult. We'll make sure that they understand next time not to touch your body. Like, he didn't do anything inappropriately. He was trying to help, but it's just one of those things that come up. And then, but that was a great exercise in building trust because she did everything correctly. She said, let me go. And he did. So she has her voice. So when these things happen to our kids, we've empowered them through other things that have happened in the analog world or the digital world. Because one thing with PDAers especially is like they have so much more autonomy online than they do like in, a school setting, right? So if I'm having an interaction in some sort of game where there's multiplayers and I don't like how it's going, I can leave, right?
Yeah.
Or I'm going to experience the negative consequence of my actions that I'm taking in that space, which maybe I called someone a name. I'm going to get those consequences directly as they would occur in adult world versus how sometimes it gets really triangulated in a school setting when adults get involved and get in between kids. You know what I'm saying? Like naturally. So I think there's pros and cons to it all, but it's about like resourcing our kids, having conversations. And then we can't stay ahead of this. We're just going to have to keep up with it as it goes.
No,
and as our kids like are coming up with stuff, because like the way that they can use it, my 10-year-old used it the other day to like figure out, she plays piano by ear and she doesn't read music. So she like went through and asked a song she's working on for it to just tell her the notes. And then it printed it out. And then she went over there and banged it out. So it was like a quicker way than sitting there and listening to it, which I love. Yeah. But then at the same time, I like that she's actually listening to it and figuring it out on her own.
Yeah.
I'm all over the place. Sorry about that.
No, I think like I actually, for as unconventionally as we do it, I feel good about how we're navigating screens and tech and AI because I'm in it with them, right? I'm in it. We're talking about it. It's coming up all the time. We're making mistakes as parents, as kids. And then, as you said, we're coming back to be like, okay, within the safety of the relationship and home, what happened? That was scary. Like my son has stumbled upon a scary video before, or, he's watching his football stuff and then it's all of a sudden everyone's saying the F word and my 6-year-old's in the room. And it's like, these are going, like, it's either going to happen in our home or once they're out of our home, if they are. But I would so much rather have like been in the muck of it with them and felt safety than just like tried to avoid it completely and then be like good luck at 18.
Yeah. Have fun navigating that world that I protected you from. Yeah. It's totally walking with it and sharing your own mistakes too, right?
Totally.
About like,
And there
hey,
are many.
there are many. I was so mad at ChatGPT the other day because I had this great idea of like gamifying cleaning the house. It's like, oh, I'm gonna make a board game. It's gonna be so much fun. I have the free version, and it was totally like great for brainstorming because I told it what I wanted. Then it had some ideas. I was like, yeah, that's actually like a good idea. And then so we had it all sketched out. It was time to make the image of the game board. It's like, you have reached your limit of, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna have to wait till tomorrow. Anyways, it took like 5 days. Nobody got that time because every day I was like prompting it to give it to me and I was getting frustrated with it. So we had these conversations around how it's not that smart sometimes. And so we just moved to Canva, and it actually became like a team effort where we were all working on it and we were all collaborating to make the game board in Canva because we had the concept figured out. And so it's kind of like a fun invitation for a relational component. And so we did a better job than ChatGPT. Anyways, eventually I got the image and it was like, oh, ours is so much better.
Totally. Canva for the win. We are time to
we got to wrap this up.
Wrap it up.
We've had too much fun.
I didn't set my little Fitbit. Okay. So
we're like twinsies.
Gotta have the tech tell me what time it is. Okay. Why don't we finish up with our families who are listening with any final thoughts, prompts, ideas, or pieces of advice that you would share? I loved how you shared those prompts that you did in your community. I think those are great for reflection. Mm-hmm. When I first think about AI, I have a nervous system response of like, the world is going to hell in a handbasket. Yeah. Like,
I have a similar one.
Yeah. And then with some reflection and radical acceptance, like, this is what is, and like, I can still make decisions. Mm-hmm. And I loved how you said, like, everyone can go at their own pace, and like, you don't have to use AI.
Yeah.
I mean, I started using it because it helps me with some business stuff, but like, I also go in little spurts, and then I need to like remove myself. And
yeah, I do that too. I'm like, I'm liking you a little too much lately. We're going to go on a break.
I'm going to go look at a tree trunk for an hour.
Yeah. I'm going to go hug that tree trunk.
I'm going to go hug it. But do you have any final thoughts that you'd like to share with families?
Yes. Thank you for asking. And I love your thoughts right there. So kind of to piggyback on that, I think to remind ourselves that like, this is a frontier. This is a new landscape for everyone. Our kids are adapting to it quicker. We are the parents that are parenting this generation. And so you have to give yourself lots of compassion. I love how you and I were just talking about doing it with our kids, right? It's always such a good answer. So just a reminder to parents, it's the frontier, no pressure. Just because I use AI doesn't mean you need to use AI. Just because Casey uses AI doesn't mean that you need to use AI. Take what works for you out of this conversation and leave the rest. And then also to look back through the lens of history. We kind of touched on it earlier with like television, but one of my community members, I remember sending out an email to my list and just talking about like, I have to remind myself, I don't know if you watched Downton Abbey, but like the first episode, Granny, like the electrical light had just come and the telegraph, the Titanic was sinking. This is like 1914 or something. And they just put electricity in the house, and she came over for dinner and she was like, oh, oh my gosh, this is electricity.
Too bright.
It's too bright. This is going to I'm sure there was all kinds of fear and like this, what is this? Right. And so we're laughing about that because like here we are like, that's just not something we even think about anymore. One of my community members said, it's like the radio, everyone is really worried about the radio. And she's right. That was the technology of its era. And so this is our technology. It's obviously more complex than a radio.
And it's moving much more quickly.
And it's moving very fast. Like just in the span since you and I set up this call, like, I'm just like, oh my gosh, just in like, it's been like a month and it's just...
Yeah.
We have AI friends now. If people are dating AI who are married, like we're not even going to go there.
Okay. Yeah, I can't. It's too much.
It's too much. But like, I'll part with, there are lots of ways to use AI that are like as a tool that are super helpful. I use it to meal plan. Like we use it to spot the learning. So like a lot of parents who are home educating, they're seeing their kid on Minecraft and they don't necessarily view it as educational. Well, I think Minecraft is kind of viewed as educational, but maybe their kid is watching their 15th episode of Bluey today, and they're not seeing that as really valuable, like the 15th time, maybe the first 2 times, but now on the 15th time, we're not seeing it as valuable.
And can I interject that we're on the 6th time watching The Parent Trap in a week?
Yeah, you're like, oh my God.
Okay. So 10 times or 12 times watching Bluey.
Yeah. And like we as parents, we've been conditioned to like elevate documentaries and downgrade like Fortnite, or elevate Sesame Street, but downgrade SpongeBob or whatever. But when we look at it and we look at the kid that we have, like there is learning there. And so a lot of the times, like AI can help you with that. So you might say, hey, what is my child learning from Bluey? Or what is my child learning from stacking the same tower 6 times? Or what is my child learning? Like that's helpful. There's so many different ways we can use AI as parents and as kids to compile, to organize our thoughts, especially if we have executive functioning challenges ourselves as parents. Like, man, it's a really great tool. And so, there's an invitation to explore it if that feels good to you, but do the work yourself first before you jump in. If you're considering jumping into AI, would be my recommendation, just to like, not just jump in because everybody else is. Like jump in because you're curious and you want to see what it's like.
And you're ready.
You're ready. And there's no race. Like you know how to do life without ChatGPT and AI and all that.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, I love it. Thank you so much for talking to me. This is such a great, juicy topic that I think is on a lot of people's minds. So I appreciate your leadership on it, because I invited you on the podcast because I saw you asking these questions on social media, and I was like, oh, we need to talk about this.
Yeah. So I'm not taking any credit. Those are the parents in my community that are like, we need to talk about this. And I'm like, oh yeah, we do. So let's do that. So thank you so much for inviting me to have this conversation. And I'm thanking my parents who are listening, who helps me flesh out my own thoughts, right? Like and that's the power of community that AI cannot replicate, is like talking to actual human beings. Ideas spark ideas, and our connection, like connection and community, are vital, maybe more now than ever.
Yeah, agree. All right. Thank you so much, Kelly.
All right. Take care.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks everyone for being here with me at the At Peace Parents podcast. This is your source for all things related to understanding, supporting, accommodating, and advocating for your PDA child. To go deeper on any of these topics, check out my course offerings and masterclasses at the website www.atpeaceparents.com. To completely transform the way you think about and relate to your child, and to bring peace and stability to your home, join us for the next cohort of the Paradigm Shift program.